Welcome to Friday night's video in our Master Series. This is the 123rd video in our Master Series and the 9th video in our group processing phase. We have got done with our mid-side, and I certainly hope you understood the importance of having that bus in line for evaluation, repairs, and enhancement. And we've moved on, now we're routed into the Reverb bus. So when we get into Reverb Spatialization bus, that this is, well, once again, I want to remind you about the 3 steps forward, 3 steps back. So I'm trying to do that in every one of these steps, that you remember that any work you might do here cause you to go back and reevaluate those individual tracks or those individual buses off on either tracks or the groups. And also you might go back through and reevaluate anything you've done in line one at a time, coming back to where you started there. It might cause you to do that, and if you take that into consideration, that you will become a much better mixing engineer. And also to evaluate whether or not any work you do here, especially on this Reverb bus and Spatialization bus, that sometimes it might be better to go back to those individual tracks or those individual groups and do some work there, because you might not want to do a lot on the whole mix, where it might just be needed on some specific aspect or part of the mix. So really keep that in mind. So the other thing we talked about, that each different section has to be dealt with as its own mix unto itself, that might need more. Sometimes I have a section I want to put more on, and some section I don't want to put as much on because of whatever's happening there. So really keep that in mind and address each different section as its own individual mix that might have its own needs to be addressed. And we taught, and that might take automation. So really get used to using your automation on any of your tools and plugins and the buses and things like that. So we basically, that and your analysis tools. I always remind you to always keep your analysis tools open to be able to go through them, phase meters, level meters, tone balance, controls, and whatever you might have, spectrometers to analyze what's going on to help you make better decisions and see what you've done. So now when we get to the reverberation and spatialization bus, that this is normally we're trying to sweeten the mix. Like I said, when we go through processing here, that if you find yourself doing a lot, you're more than likely, if you're adding a lot of anything, that more than likely it's better to go back to those individual tracks or their buses coming off of them or those groups and deal with it there. Because this is normally just sweetening. And this one is huge because you remember I had talked about when we were going through the saturation bus that we're really trying to meld and blend things together and glue the mix together. And we talked about how that, then when we're going into the stereo field bus, how that can be used to do the same thing. And we're really looking for that effect on this bus when we're dealing with reverberation and spatialization. Now again, we're using the same preset that we put on all the buses from all the groups or individual tracks that we've chosen for the spatialization preset, that has a certain reverb and the analog delay that we use as an echo effect. And it's that same preset and same combination that we use more or less on different buses and tracks. So when we get here, we want to use the same one. And basically, for the most part, most of the time, you might get some section that you want to add a lot to. That it's like, for some reason, you got this break or this, transition or something that you want to add a lot to as an effect. It's like you just want to add a lot, for an effect. And that's okay. You probably find yourself having to really use your automation to get out of that for the coming section, but that's okay. But the biggest part of this and the biggest use of this and what this bus is mainly for is blending the mix together, and gluing the mix together, and that kind of a concept. Because when you start listening, you listen to the mix without any of this on, and when you start to add some in there, you start out with your reverberation, and you start adding some in there, and you're like, okay, I'm going to add some in there. I normally do this one section at a time because some sections are different, but I find a lot of times with this bus, I can add the same amount all the way across the entire mix fairly easily. unless I have some part of the some section in the mix that really is having a clarity issue, or it just needs more, because sometimes, one section will need more than another section because of clarity issues, or you're trying to blend more things together, or there's less things going on to where you can add more to that different section. And so it really has to be looked at that way. But, let's say we're just working on the chorus. I'm going to come in there. I'm going to bring it in there like I've said before. And I'm like, all right, I can hear it there. It's starting to add. I'm going to back off a little bit. I'm going to A-B it back and forth. How's that sound? Walk away, come back. Do that a few times. Come back off it to 0. Come into it. Yeah, I can hear it there. Back off a little bit. How does that sound? A-B it back and forth. Walk away, come back. The biggest thing about this is the spatialization and the sweetening that we're doing now, that for the most part, we're really trying to sweeten things and blend things together, glue the mix together using this spatialization preset and this reverb bus for that purpose. And so if you listen to a lot of mixes, you'll find a lot of times you don't sit back and hear a bunch of reverb going on and echo effect. And you're going, I don't hear a whole bunch of reverb and echo effect when I'm listening to this great track that I really love this music. So really keep that in mind. So when you start to hear it, you really want to back off and then A-B it back and forth. Most of the time it's very light. Like I come in here, I might add 2% or something, at most, and that might be a lot for certain mixes. It's just kind of blending things together, melding things together, gluing the mix together, taking a little bit of the rough edge off anything, helping things preserve their identity. And we're not trying to take that away from that, but just trying to help them just kind of meld and blend together, and also, besides that, it really helps that you've used this preset on all those different buses previous to this work. So you using that same space and preset to try to enhance that a little bit. So now they're all running through this preset that's set the same for all those buses coming off, that's trying to put the whole mix into this space that we've decided. I've decided a medium hall, and this is the response that I'm using, and I basically got my echo effect, the same set on there, but I'm going to add more or less of it to the mix at this point. So I do the reverberation plus, and once I'm happy with it, I really go back and now evaluate how that affected, my other tracks, and if I can evaluate it from the other tracks or fix things there instead of putting more on the whole mix. Does that make sense? And that's a huge concept. Once I get done with that, I go to my echo effect, that's that trailing echo effect, and start seeing how much you can put in there. Normally, this is very minuscule also. You're going to bring it in there a little bit. Yeah, I can hear it happening there. Back off, and then, it might be 1 or 2% only that you're adding in there. That's just putting the whole mix in this spot. Now, once you get done, that you've got them, you've done this one first, the reverberation, and then you've left that on, you've done the echo effect, and then you listen to it. Now, I normally do this one section at a time because it can be different. Now, a lot of times that I won't, and I'll go through the mix and say, no, I can do the whole mix with that. But sometimes it'll have a different effect in one section to where it's not as complementary to the mix in the next section, so you want to evaluate it one section at a time. And it's a pretty simple concept. We've basically kind of glued and melded and blended the track together, or the mix together with this, and helped put everything in the same place, because we've chosen a place. We've got a little bit of echo effect to enhance that a little bit, and now everything has basically been put into the same place and blended together a little bit, which can have a really cool effect. The biggest concern about this that I normally preach is to go light, because if you really sit down and listen to music you really like, that a lot of times that you just don't hear a whole lot of reverb and echo thing going on, but a lot of times it is there. And a really huge thing that I've heard a lot of people say a lot of times in mixing is, if you can hear it, especially in reverberation, it's too much, so back off a little bit. When you get done with the whole mix, it's like you can always add more, but the chances are that if you go light, you're better going light. If it's not doing anything at all, that's obvious that you need to add a little bit more. But sometimes you might not. You've done a lot of work before on those individual tracks with the spatialization. And normally I add a little bit of this no matter what, just to kind of glue it together. Does that make sense? That way they all running through this, the same spatialization preset that we had set up, and it just kind of glues everything together a little bit. I just be real careful of it muddying the mix, because the reverberations and the echo effect can really muddy the mix fast. So that's not what you're looking for. So you really want to be careful of that. And any buses that you put a lot on, when you do this, that you may want to go back to those individual buses and lessen the amount of the preset that you have on those individual buses. So because now it's adding more in, and you want to be able to use this to glue together. But now that you have the settings that you've chosen for all the buses you have, now adding more to it is too much. So it's better to go back to those individual buses from those groups and individual tracks, back off a little bit on those ones, and then add a little bit here to try to glue things together. Does that make sense? And also, once you get to this point that you can reevaluate what you did to those individual tracks, you might go back and go, well, no, the vocals or the chorus or something can use more now. Now that I'm getting to that point, now that I'm done basically after this with my spatialization, reverberation, and things like that, that I can add more. I really do, or I've less. It's like, no, I need to back off that a little bit. Or sometimes, no, I really think the vocals could use more. It sound much better with a little bit more in there. And so you going back and reevaluating that. Once you've got this set to where you're pretty happy with it and you've set it up pretty well, you go back to these buses here and reevaluate how that affect. Do I need to rework any of that? Does any of that need to be reworked? And then back to this one. If you've done any work here, then reevaluate the work you've done here, that you might redo it a little bit or add less or add a little bit more. I don't know. So it's sounds time consuming, but that process is really going to help you do a really good job of evaluating everything well, and a lot of times, so that this, hopefully that process eventually will get you to where you get done with it. That process, you go back through and dump, so you don't die in front of your mixing board trying to make the perfect mix, because you went through that and you evaluated it. It's okay. You're done. You've made your decision. You moved on here. No, I've done it. I'm done. I'm good to go. I'm not going to die in front of my mixing board. On to the next thing. So I hope that helps you get through that. Most mixers and most engineers will go through that phase until they become pretty good engineers, and then they have trust their judgment more and their workflow, in doing a good workflow of 3 steps forward, 1 step back, and evaluating things really well, really helps them overcome that to where they're moving forward instead of getting stuck and dying in front of their mixing board trying to make the perfect mix. So, and it's a pretty simple concept, and I hope I made that really clear, so that, when you go to do this, understand we're really trying to sweeten the mix. We're trying to blend things together a little bit, meld things together a little bit, and just kind of, that kind of effect, and that all those buses and all those groups are, getting, helped get put in the place that we've been trying to put them in by the choice of the preset that we've used for our convolution reverb, whatever spatialization preset we've chosen, and adding a little bit of echo effect off of that, with the feedback and the mix in, and whatever on this is how I use this plugin for the echo effect, and we talked about that when we put the preset together, and to try to enact that effect on the mix. So just remember, a lot of times some of the biggest advice is to go light and just listen to some of your favorite productions and listen. That there doesn't, they went in the mix and they started adding things in and you can hear reverb, so they backed off. Does that make sense? And I don't really hear reverb going on, but I A-B it back and forth, that I know that there's some there. But I don't hear reverb and echo, whoa. Does that make sense? All over the place. That can cause a lot of mud in the mix that you don't want, unless it's, for a specific effect or something like that. So I hope I made that really simple and a workflow to go through, and talking about the concepts that you need to think about when you're going through that. Be real careful of the low end. The reverberations and echo effect multiply problems, so as well as enhance things. So be real careful of that, of it causing issues and mud. So watch for that very carefully and look for that on your analysis instruments. So I really hope you enjoyed this video on sweetening our mix in our spatialization reverb bus as we go through group processing, and I will see you in the next video.